Okay, now will you be able to give me cues at the end of the show?
Yes.
Like 1 minute left? And what's very important to me
Okay, let's have quiet on the set.
is 30 seconds.
Okay, 30 seconds.
Are you ready to vote in the statewide general election this November? I'll speak with several city council candidates on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. Many observers think that the midterm elections this November will have far more voters casting ballots than in previous midterm elections. This year, it seems that the voters are all fired up. In the city of East Palo Alto, there are 7 city council candidates running for 2 seats on the 5-member city council. 2 of the 7 already sit on the council, and the other 5 candidates would like to replace them this November. I have 5 of the city council candidates with me tonight. Seated to my far left is Ruben Abrica, the mayor of East Palo Alto, whose term on the council expires this November. Seated beside him is author and eBay executive Regina Wallace-Jones. And seated to my far right beside Regina is Loren Court Skinner, who serves on the East Palo Alto City Planning Commission. Seated to my right is Bernardo Huerta, who is a member of the East Palo Alto Public Works and Transportation Committee. And seated beside him is Patricia Finau Lopez, who is a community activist in East Palo Alto. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with me. Now you just, oh, but of course.
A pleasure, always a pleasure. Henrietta.
Always a pleasure. Well,
Always a
I'm
pleasure.
glad you feel that way. Now, I mentioned in the introduction that people seem to be fired up, and more voters are expected to come out. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
What makes you think
Yes.
so?
Because it's an important election. It has to do with the livelihood of our people who's in East Palo Alto. There's been a lot of things that's happening, and you know, the gentrification, the displacement, the homeless crisis, traffic, you know, the corporations and the tech companies, all these things that are happening in our community.
Okay, so do the rest of you feel that way?
Changes
Changes in the air? What kind of
It
change
began
do you
with
see
Mr.
in
Trump,
the air?
who reminded us all that there are more than one kind of voter in the world. Sometimes we get upset about that, and sometimes we don't. At least some of us don't. But I think, and that has sort of percolated all the way down to local elections, which in my opinion are the most important elections that any of us can participate in. So it's really nice to see this much enthusiasm about an election at this level.
I think one other factor is the fact that so many people are running. And so I think anytime people are out there communicating with the voters, talking to people, having forums, it does bring in more people, which it's always good. I think it's good to have more people participate. And locally, I think there is a lot of interest. There's certainly big issues like housing and traffic, the economy. They continue to be education. Those are really important things for people in our community and also in other parts.
Okay, you mentioned bringing in more people, and I have to say we certainly brought in some of the people in our studio audience, and I'd like to acknowledge them for being here, so thank you so much for coming. Regina, you might want to say something.
Yeah, you know, I think so. Internationally, I'm thinking it's an exciting time. We just found out about Ethiopia getting its first female president, I think, which is a big deal. Nationally, it's clearly an exciting and energetic time when we look at governors and Senate seats across the country. So while it's not a presidential year, I think the energy nationally is just really healthy and really strong. And when I think about the city of East Palo Alto, what I'm excited about is that we get to not only capitalize on the energy that is flowing around us, but also draw our attention to really important matters that are happening in our own city.
That's very interesting. Now, I find it fascinating that you said the energy nationally is very healthy. You think that?
High.
High. Okay,
High.
thank you. Now, Bernardo, I have to give you a chance.
Well, I feel what people came to me about running is that they have a lot of uncertainty in what's going on regionally right here. You know, the cost of housing and will their jobs change, and will they have to move? Will they keep their jobs? All that other stuff. You know, yes, it's Trump and all his you know, people that he's put on his cabinet. It's made national news, but people, you know, that I run into that really don't watch those national news, they're very concerned about what's going on. You know, what's next for them, and that's why I'm running. You know, it's because they keep asking me, what's next? What about this new law? What's coming up next?
Okay, so let's talk about what's next. Now, some of you have already mentioned problems, and it's easy to start with the problems. I won't start that way. I'll ask you, what do you like about the city that you live in right now? What do you like about it?
Oh, that's easy. It's a fascinating place. There's all kinds of different people here with all kinds of different ideas, and it's a genuine challenge to get them all to work together towards something that actually I think they all believe in.
And you think having all of the different people with different ideas, and that makes it challenging, makes it fun to live in?
It makes it fun. It makes it fun to live in. And it also, I think, makes it easier to actually make progress in a city like East Palo Alto. That because you have all the points of view, and it's a challenge to get them all to in sync, but I think it can be done.
Okay, and the rest of you?
You know, I like to think of East Palo Alto. Some years ago, I had served on the Joint Powers Authority for the San Francisco Creek, where we're dealing with flooding, environmental stuff, recreation, trying to beautify the place and protect people. And it really came home to me that, among other things, I think East Palo Alto is a beautiful coastal city. Our destiny is really connected to the bay, even before sea level rise. And what it does for me is that reminds us of all the great things that East Palo Alto has, including good weather, you know, access to the bay. Instead of thinking of ourselves only as a problem city, which I think sometimes from the outside that's the perception. It's always around the freeway and traffic. Those are serious problems, many of which we inherited before we became a city. And so I think and our community has suffered. I think it is a fact. It continues to suffer. You know, whether it's the national or the state situation, continues to suffer a lot. Low wages, high cost of living,
now you're getting into the problems.
I know. And so to balance it, exactly. So to balance it, I think, you know, let's look to the bay, to the beauty of the bay, nature, the beauty of people, the way that we can, you know, overcome these things and keep going.
Keep going.
So,
okay.
yeah.
I really appreciate our city's rich diversity. And, you know, for me, moving in and around various cities throughout the Bay Area, it's very special to come home and know that for every other city where any one of our ethnic groups is 1 or 2%, in the city of East Palo Alto, we are much bigger than that inside of the city. That's exciting. I also think it's pretty cool that those who were here to incorporate the city are still alive.
Like Ruben.
Like Ruben,
and still serving on the
Bob
city
Hoover.
council.
Exactly. And so for me, it becomes like some history that's not in a book someplace. It's like a history that you can access in the moment, which I think is really cool. And then the third thing I particularly like about East Palo Alto is I think of it as the gateway, but also the conscience of Silicon Valley. And so I personally don't think that we can ever achieve our full potential as an industry until we pay attention to what's happening in East Palo Alto and make sure that its tide is rising along with all other cities.
Okay. Bernardo and Patricia, what you like about East Palo Alto?
What I like about East Palo Alto, the cultural that's rich in our community, the ethnic, the diversity. Growing up in East Palo Alto, it was such a richness of family ties. It was, everyone knew each other. Everyone knew the families down the street. Everyone was, you know, when children of neighbors came over to play with other children, there was a trust and a culture that was there. And so it was, you know, based on, of course, we had God, and then we had family, and then community. And so growing up in that environment was something that I really, really appreciated, and I really love, because now where we're at, it's something of a whole new different situation.
Okay, we'll talk about where we're at later. Bernardo, what you like?
Well, I was born and raised in East Palo Alto. I remember when this was part of the county, and the county didn't treat us that well. You know, I live right next to a park. I grew up right next to Jack Farrell Park. They turned off the water, so the park was just barren and stuff. That's how the former county used to treat us. And you know, we're still a young city. We don't have so many laws as, you know, San Francisco's been around 150 years. So they have 150 years of ordinances that they've passed over the years. So it's, even though it's very free, but we're probably even a freer community because we actually have less laws on the books. And we act free, we can make more music or whatever around each other and not be bothered by that. We remember how it used to be with the county. We're almost enjoying that we're now able to see it's turned and it's paying off better. You know, the park next to my mom's house is now really well fixed up. People walk around it. Before it was filled with glass all the way around. It sparkled, but you know, that's because it was broken glass.
Okay.
But you know, that's what our community was and how it's transformed, and it's, you know, it's what we've done.
Okay, now we'll talk about what you'll do. You're running for the city council. You've talked about what you like about East Palo Alto. So if you're elected to the council, what will you do to preserve what you like about the city? And why should you be on the council rather than someone else? Everybody's talking.
Let's not all jump in
Nobody wants to start in there?
We're waiting for you to pick on us, Henrietta.
No.
I know we're used to that, you know,
All right.
just a different.
Hey,
I will, unless you
I'll start.
volunteer.
I'll be happy to start. And I've been walking around the city for the last, my God, it's been about 6 months. And I knock on the door and I say, I'm Court Skinner and I'm running for city council. And about, I don't know, a month ago, it occurred to me that I really should be saying, I'm Court Skinner and I'm ready to be on the city council. Make it a little more positive. Because I've lived here for 30 years. And I'll admit, the first 10 years, I just lived here. But the last 20, I've become a serial volunteer. So I fix people's computers, I help kids learn how to fix bikes, I help out the little kids at Creative Montessori. A couple of my kids went to Creative Montessori and they did well. And they even learned Spanish, which I thought was amazing.
And that qualifies you to run on the council, to be on the council.
Not just that. I'm also a member of a variety of boards where I watch things get done, like the O'Connor Tract Water Co-op. There's several water companies, not all of them as successful as the O'Connor Tract, so I've actually learned from the best. I've done IT. I've done all kinds of jobs. And I also have been studying over the last 2 years how cities like East Palo Alto can operate in a way that's different from most of its neighbors.
Now, before you get into that,
okay,
and we'll try and let you get into that, I'd like to, and I asked a two-part question, and I'll simplify it. Why should you, each of you, be elected to the council rather than someone else who's running?
Well,
No, don't expect me to call on you.
Yeah, right. So I'll tell you why I'm running for,
again.
I'm
You were
running
on
for
the first
re-election.
council,
And, you
what,
know,
1983,
yeah,
right?
so I did get an opportunity, and it was an honor to serve on the first city council. And then later in the 90s, I was not in the city council. So this is my second time around over the years. I've dedicated myself. I see myself as a public servant, and it's something that I like doing. I enjoy doing it. I don't have all the answers, but I think I have provided some, good ideas. I'm able to work with, I think, most council members over the years, and certainly I think we have different perspectives, but other than the very first few years on the city council where it was literally a struggle to survive as a city, I think after that, whoever's gotten on the council, whoever gets on the council, does have the best interest of the city. I just like to believe that. And so I'm definitely getting much older, but I feel like I still have enough energy, and I'm willing to put my time to continue to improve our community and work with whoever is willing to do that too.
Okay, Regina, are you getting much older?
I'm getting every day I'm counting the couple of gray hairs that are accumulating in my sideburns over here. But ultimately I say that the best council members are those who can empathize across a broad cross-section of experiences, because we are indeed a broad cross-section of community. They are leaders who can collaborate very effectively. They're leaders that can communicate across a broad range of constituencies, and they're also leaders that can drive impact. So for me, I do honor and treasure the duration of time that that any candidate has been here, because their time here has enriched the city. And still,
Candidate, council member?
Both.
Okay.
Duration of time, I think, is an interesting and it's an important metric. But the real question is, what is the impact that we have driven in that time? That's the important thing. And so for some of us, like myself, who's only been here for 16 years, the question is, what are the fundamental things that have changed in the time that I have been here, and how can we use those things as a gauge and temperature read for what would be to come if elected?
Okay, we can talk about that. Those fundamental things that have changed since the city's incorporation in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why, Patricia, should you be elected?
Why should I be elected? Well, I still have family and friends that are still living in East Palo Alto. 49 years of my life there. I invested a lot. My family has, my friends, my neighbors. And if I were to get elected, and first most all, I want to say thank you, and I honor Abrica, who's been there for such a long time and been holding up the fort, and been our city council member for a long time. And my parents here remember you, and so so I just want to say thank you for you and what you have done for our city. But it's a privilege. It's a privilege and an honor to be served on the city council. And I look at myself as a servant to the community. I don't want to be a person that's not approachable, but I want to be a person that is approachable. I want to serve everyone, that with all different ethnic group, issues, problems, it has to be approachable, and it has to be a person that is approachable on all levels. And so one of the things that we need to focus on is housing. Housing is the #1 issue that's going on in our community. There's not enough affordable housing, and we need more affordable housing to, to properly house the people of East Palo Alto.
Before you go further, I'll have to
Yes.
give Bernardo a chance.
Well, I was on the Planning Commission for 8 years. I've been on the Public Works and Transportation Commission for 16 years.
16.
16 years. It's members keep leaving. There's not much to do on that commission, and we need to appoint, because sometimes there are so many folks leave all the time. And so I've been a part of 2 other nonprofits for 16 years apiece, one East Palo Alto and Nuestra Casa. But I've also been, since 1999, since the first time I was put on any committee or for the city, it's been 15 different other committees and subcommittees that the city has put me, either I'm in a planning commission or public works, or city council appoints me. They've appointed me to all these other organizations inside the city, over all city elements, So I do have the background of always going to city council meetings for, these 19 years. It seems boring, but I've gone to about half of them, so I understand a lot what's going on. I know, being on the Public Works and Transportation Commission, I see what other cities do. I know the city, everybody complains about traffic, but what are the essential legal things that we need to do to control traffic here in the city? I'd like to work on those issues.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Now, if elected, not why should you be elected, but if you're elected, what would be your priority? You talked about what you like about the city. So what would be your priority, I would assume, in preserving what you like?
Mm-hmm.
Who would like to start?
I'm happy to start.
Okay.
So I really have 5 priorities as a council candidate. One is what I call community building. And the reason why that's very important to me is because quietly a substantial percentage of our residents have changed just in the last 4 years. And I'm not celebrating that that's happening. I'm noticing that it's happening. And
Changing
I'm saying,
how? Not that they're getting older.
well, no,
We're not talking about the same residents who are
New
changing.
residents have moved in. 25% of our residents have changed, fundamentally changed. Their faces are different than they were 4 years ago. And I'm not celebrating it, but I am noticing that that happened and appreciating that it did happen and believing that in that midst, we still have to build community so that we can be our best.
Is this gentrification?
Well, can I get to the remainder of my priorities and
Well,
then
I
get
was
with...
just asking in terms of the change.
Well, and I still want to get to my priorities because I haven't couched my words using that language, and so I want to get through my priorities and then get to your ask, if that's okay. My second priority is housing, more affordable housing at more income levels, and for me that includes housing at the lowest levels of income and earning, and housing at the highest levels of income earning. We need to supply both in our city to help ensure that we have the revenue base to support our programs, our services, our staff, and our destiny as a city in East Palo Alto. The third thing I think that's super important to me is dealing with traffic congestion, and I've been super, super vocal about voting no on Proposition 6 for me and yes on Measure W, because there is our 3-year path to moving some of the traffic off of our major thoroughfare streets. Then the 2 other areas that are incredibly important to me are education and technology, and by that I mean I believe that council in 2018 needs to be working with and alongside our school board to help make sure that our schools are the very best and that we are equipping our kids for the next generation of jobs.
Now, Regina, I'd love to give everybody else
Yes,
the same
okay,
amount
fair
of
enough.
time.
You said no time, so I'm going for it.
Yes, I know, but have to go on to the next person.
Fair
Thank
enough.
you.
Yes.
Who would like to be next in terms of the priorities
Yes.
that you would go after if you're elected?
Yes. So I would go after, of course, work hard on the housing crisis that's happening in our community. There's really not enough low-income housing for our community. We have a crisis of people living in the household that had 2 or 3 or 4 families, and we're all in there. And the reason why is because there is no affordable housing for these families to try to go and make their own livable, you know, a sustainable income for their own family. So that would be my first priority, is try to focus on the housing development in our community. We do need to look at, there is Mid-Peninsula that's already in our community as well, and they provide affordable housing for below market rate for mix of community, such as veterans, single mothers, single parents, single fathers, homelessness, and mental illness as well. So I would really focus on that, because we do have a crisis of homelessness that's happening in our community, where we have on Bay Road, where we have the RVs community that's piling up there. We have people sleeping in their cars. We have people in tents. And so that there, we need to at least try to focus on it so that we can help people that are really in need.
Thank you, Patricia. Who would like to?
And then my second one.
Well, you'll have to come back.
You know, I would say, just following Patricia, I would say that for me, shelter really, it's a human right. That's the way I see it. No human being should be having to worry so much about a place to be. Unfortunately, our society, I think, is way behind in our ethical thinking. So I definitely appreciate, perhaps, you know, people like Patricia and Bernardo, who have grown up in East Palo Alto. I think they fully realize the impact of seeing families, maybe even their own families, being disrupted by this incredible force of those who have much more money in the free market can come in and displace people. And granted that we have a lot of measures on the city to protect those who don't own property, but I think we need to do more in order to provide housing for what is really still the majority of our population. Definitely, I think there's some people who are doing very well, who own several properties. Those who were able to hold on to their little homes, I think have an opportunity. Sometimes maybe they're even pressured, maybe they wouldn't like to move, but do that. But it's all the other people who are not able to do that, that if we don't do something, nobody else is going to do it. So that to me is a high priority, to continue working on housing. On economic development, we'll stop there. We'll do it one by one.
Yes,
She's the boss, Henrietta.
So now it's Loren or Bernardo? Or Court, forgive me.
Court.
Well, for me, you know, one thing I have been focused on is all the items in the cities next door to East Palo Alto, and Facebook and others, you know, large companies in the region, how they're affecting East Palo Alto, and where the rents are going up. You know, 63% or so of the houses in East Palo Alto are rented. So it's not all everybody owns. A lot of people will come and go. There's a lot of transient nature to the residents of East Palo Alto. But you talk to these people later on, there's 5 years later, they're still here. People will come and go. They see East Palo Alto as an investment, but I see it as a community. The community I grew up, community I like to see, enjoy the fruits of our labor becoming a city and making this better better little by little. So you know, every little thing that Menlo Park or Facebook does, you know, we need to start, you know, noticing these companies here. You know, this is what you're doing, you know, in this year, this quarter. This is how it's affected our rents, how it's gone up. Oh, you're opening another office. Well, that just made, you know, that news got out to the 63% of these these homes that are owned by people outside the city raise the rents. Those people have to be held accountable. People, you know, other cities know what East Palo Alto's been doing for years. Affordable housing for its residents. Otherwise, we'd have been out a long time ago. So that's what the central tenet of what the government of East Palo Alto has been trying to do. And I'm trying to support every manner possible to get other cities and other corporations in the area to understand what they're doing.
Sure, thank you. Court.
I was 30 years as a manager of a large corporation, and I was 14 years in the Planning Commission. And when I look at the situation here, yeah, housing is important, but a balanced approach where we look not only at housing, because we could be like Fremont, supplying a lot of housing. Fremont, of course, supplies a lot of housing and a lot of traffic because everybody in Fremont is going over to Palo Alto to work. But if we can balance our community by providing jobs and housing for the whole spectrum, as Regina has pointed out, and our own commercial development, so there are things to do for the people who have jobs in East Palo Alto. They also have a place to go eat, a place to go shop, a place to do the things that people tend to do in cities. And I think if we can continue to work, what I say is we need lots of conversation to come up with the plans to make things better in all those areas across that whole spectrum of what makes a city that's successful, and then practice collaboration of the various skills that we already have and the ones we need to develop. Then we can implement the plans that we make in the conversation.
Now, you've talked about your priorities, and it's one thing to list the priorities and the problems, but it's another thing to make an approach, to actually take steps. So what would be your first steps if you're elected to the council? Knowing that you're not the only person there and you can't do things by yourself. So what would be your approach to your priorities?
Well, my approach would be, I'll jump in this time too. There's a couple of things that are already in motion. One is we have a measure on the ballot, HH, which if 2/3 of the voters approve, will provide additional funds. It's a commercial office, large commercial office tax that will provide money for job training opportunities for high tech and the building trades, also additional money for affordable housing. So that's a way that the city can raise revenues and do both job training, because we keep hearing about the high tech always being short on getting community people or minority people, and like, well, if we have to do that, then that's headed to provide those things. So we'll have to, council will still have to work with staff to implement something like that. I hope it passes. I'm definitely a strong supporter of that. The other thing is that we are on the verge of a new cycle of development. I think all of us are sensing that because, to the credit of the entire community, we went through a long general plan process, got a lot of input, what people wanted. So that whole area, Four Corners, we call it, that goes to the Bay, from Bay University, it's slated for development. We have approved all the basic documents. So the developers are going to start knocking on our door saying, we want to develop that area. So I think the big challenge is going to be that development happens in a way that more revenue comes in. But one specific thing that I want to work on is make sure that this time around, and that includes getting the energy from a lot of the new people, because I think sometimes when people are new in a city, they want to do something, something maybe different. We need many more small businesses. in that area, I think this time I'm proposing, or it's not a new idea, but we need to have a building where we have micro businesses in that area.
And
we can't have just office.
That would be the way you would begin to implement your priority.
Yes, to build up the economy from the bottom up, because we are going to get the big developers. The question is, we don't want to lose the people we lost previously through redevelopment. Some businesses went away, and we need to grow more because, I think that's a sector of the population too that maybe they have a little extra money, they have, more resources that put them to use in a good way.
Thank you, Ruben. Who's next?
I will
Even though
go
I'm
next.
looking at you.
Yeah, you're looking at me, so I'll take the baton.
Because you were starting already at the other ones.
Well, I'll just, I'll stick to one or two topics because the time is limited and say, for housing, couple of things that I think in terms of approach are important. One is to continue to support the two projects that are underway to increase the affordable housing supply that we do have in East Palo Alto.
And for those who may not know what those two projects
That would be the
are.
Light Tree and the Week Street apartment projects. The second, I think, is we do need to clean up and help hasten the addition of auxiliary housing units for those who are interested in them. And I love to talk about our long-term residents who many whom are homeowners who are looking to capitalize on the asset that they have. And part of what they would love to do is to be able to add an auxiliary housing unit to their property to allow children or elders or renters to rent in their space. And we need to be a lot more judicious and swift about how we do that. The third is build more housing, period. The fourth is work with regional partners because unfortunately, we think about housing and affordability as something that is just a problem in East Palo Alto, but actually it's a problem in the entire region. And I think that East Palo Alto has done a very good job of creating a blueprint that if we're strategic and thoughtful, we can take to other cities across the Bay Area to get a more balanced footprint of housing across all of our cities. I think we need to do that. And just really quickly to extend Ruben's point, I also believe in economic development. I say all the time that to be such a culturally rich and diverse city, we should have a lot more businesses that are reflective of who we are as a people. And yet I know that the cost of real estate, including land and the price to build, when you turn that into a lease payment for most businesses, they won't be able to afford. So in addition to just needing the space, we also need to create the facility to buy down what would otherwise be the cost of a lease so that some of these businesses, salsa lessons and drumming lessons and other things that we're really good at culturally, that we can have businesses operate in those spaces and be able to run those businesses in our city without having cost prohibitive leases that they can't pay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
So-
Bernardo. Okay.
No, I don't care.
Court?
Go ahead. No, so I was just going to follow
Oh, I
up on
thought she was.
her
He
thing,
did already. Okay.
saying we need not only affordable housing, but we need affordable
Yes.
businesses.
Indeed.
So what I'm asking all of you is what would be your approach? Yes, we need these things, but how specifically are you going to go about making it happen, obtaining them?
So
Go ahead, Court.
we'd like to answer that.
You
Well,
can
we'd
go
like
ahead.
to be involved in
I'll
that
go next.
conversation. So yes, I totally agree with everything what Mr. Abrica and Regina said. And also I am a real big supporter of HH measure because I feel that it will bring revenue to our city and create jobs and housing. Also, I feel that, the transparency, the lack of transparency that's in our community. We don't have the communication with our leaders to the people of East Palo Alto. And I want to bring that transparency to the people. I want to at least hold 3 town hall meetings in East Palo Alto. I also want to see data that the community should have access and aware of what's going on with the money and funds that are coming in from different types of measures and propositions and funds that are coming from our government as well. I want to see and also present that to the people and let them know where this fund is at, where it's going to be used, and have them be a saying of where it should be used to. Also, I want, there's a lot of regulation on the second unit properties that's in our community. And we
And the
had
second units are behind the houses
yes,
themselves?
the
or
houses of
garages?
themselves, the garages built in, and some of the houses were bought in the 90s that were grandfathered into the homes that were also property owners didn't know that they were not legal at the time. So I want to try to work with my city council members, try to alleviate some of those regulations for people to be able to have those property be legit and
Thank you,
have them
Patricia.
permitted to have the second unit, because that would save a lot of the issues that are happening in our community.
Thank you. Now it's Bernardo or Court.
Go ahead, Bernard.
Oh, well,
Very
I'm looking at, like 6 different items I want, the city to really look into. Gentrification, the regional traffic, getting more city grants in the city, reopening the Parks and Rec department, that, and the services that we hardly feel today, but the residents need to feel that we have that. To share the water, since we got an increased allotment of water throughout the residents. Make sure everybody has water first, and then we can, see what we're going to do with that other half of water. And, open, preserve new businesses. But, you have to measure the people you're going to deal with on a board, on the city council. Who wants to also work on these items? I'll work on your items. You want to work with these items. Look for 3 folks on the city council. That's my approach, to get along with folks, to try to soften them, or and to help them out if they want to help out more of the city. So my approach is, would be dealing with the city council itself. The other members, city staff, you can't really, directly tell any city staff what to do. You have to, we're going to need a new city manager. I want a good city manager that really has us in mind, not other ideas they come with. And so, I first of all, would like to see, if I'm able to be in the city council, to get a city manager that's really looking out for us.
Thank you, Bernardo. Court. I'm sure you'd like to get a city manager who's looking out for everyone too.
Actually,
No?
somebody raised a question about a city manager the other day. Asked what characteristics was I looking for in a city manager.
Good question.
And first thing I'm looking for is a city manager that actually knows how to manage. My impression is that the city management is not as up to date on management skills as corporate management. But that being said, I'm looking for a city manager that has a track record, that knows how to build a stable staff and keep them happy, that can make and meet budgets, balance service and projects to enhance the quality of life in the thing.
No, I didn't necessarily want you to get off in terms of
No,
what
that's
you were
just my
looking
first,
for.
you said you wanted the list of things that I want to do, and the first one is get a good city manager.
Okay,
So
okay.
that's the first
Now
step.
that we've established that's
Yeah.
first on your list.
Right, that's very fair. I think
Thank you for
that's
leading
probably
him
the most
into that.
important thing we got to do is get a good city manager. Not that our last one was bad, but the last one is gone.
We
So
will
need
get
new
a
one.
good city manager. That will
We
happen.
will.
and to create service and the projects that enhance the quality of life, keep the place clean, keep things going, reduce unfunded liabilities and deferred maintenance, and understand technology and use it throughout the organization that we call the city staff. We haven't done that for a long time. There's a lot of stuff we can do there. The second thing is good plans. That means we got to talk among each other, with the staff, the city council, the developers, anybody in the region, essentially, who's got an input and an impact on the state of East Palo Alto. And then once we understand what plans we got to do, and that means people like Loren Court Jobs and Sobrato and our favorite landlord, Woodland Park, all of those people have got to be at the table when we're talking. Then we get to work and we do all that stuff. Those are my two.
Okay, now you've all listed your priorities and what makes you different and what you would like to do. So tell me, why do you think these things have not been done? What has been the major factors holding up the things that you think should be done in the city? And I always like people to volunteer. Right?
Yes.
I don't want them to think that they've been targeted or they're being picked on.
Yeah, I think that it is being done, but like I said, there's a lack of communication, I feel, as being a resident of East Palo Alto, trying to get different type of information on what's happening on housing, what's happening on affordable housing, what's happening to displacement and gentrification, you know, and all these type of issues that are arising in our community today. And so I think that the first thing that that we do need to do is the communication. We need to broaden the communication with the tech companies that are there. I would love to revisit the deal that happened with Amazon. I would like to understand why this deal happened. Like for most of us in East Palo Alto, we don't know why this happened, but we would like to know why, and we would like to revisit and see what we could do to make it better.
Okay, now Patricia, I'd like to follow up with everyone, the other candidates, what you said, that you've repeated twice about the lack of transparency and the lack of communication in city government. Do the rest of you think there is a lack of transparency and communication? Now, Ruben, you've been sitting on the city council. Mm-hmm. Has there been, how would you consider the communication and transparency?
I would say that that's always an issue, and it's always something that whoever's on the council, whoever's managing the city, has to constantly work on. The commissions also. The commissions are appointed in a way to serve as a liaison to hear things that then surface to the council. But, I'm in support of that. I think there is never enough transparency, period. And, I'm going to criticize right now Ravenswood School Board, because compared to us, Ravenswood School Board, you cannot watch the meetings on TV like you can watch ours. They're very close and very tight in the way they have a public relations person that speaks for everybody, including the superintendent. We don't have that. Each one of us speaks for ourselves, and people can find us and talk to us. So I'm just saying that because I think it's a problem with local governments in general. And I'm certainly in support of expanding ways in which that happens. I think our finances are very transparent. I don't think that, we get a clean record when we do the audits. The budget process, we have been trying. I've been a supporter of that, trying to make the budget more understandable to the average person, so it doesn't, become this technical thing that you have to understand.
Sure. Now, in the interest of time, I do have to get around
right.
the
So
table.
I'm just saying that it's an ongoing process that I think we have to
Regina,
keep pushing.
is there enough communication and transparency flowing from City Hall?
So from my perspective, and without indicting any entity, my general observation is just that standards change, right? 20 years ago, getting a box on our doorstep in 13 days or 14 days was exciting. That was a big deal. We could order things and get them in 14 days. In 2018, if we don't get it overnight, we're upset, right? Standards changed, right? Standards have changed with communication as well. I think that the council and the school board, for that matter, are doing what they can with what they know, and yet in 2018, there are tons of other ways that we create transparency and make ourselves accessible. So if you look at my campaign, it's running all over social media channels. I'm still knocking doors. I'm still hanging signs. That's the way that campaigns used to be run. And I haven't lost any of that, but I still recognize that there is a world that has changed around us. And so the way that we run our city has to, in some way, adopt and adapt to those changes so that we continue to engage and bring in all of the people who are interested in being a part of what makes this city great.
Court, transparency, and communication.
Okay. I'm a big believer in the rest of the story.
Even though Paul Harvey isn't among us.
Even though Paul Harvey is no longer among us, I've noticed that there is often a story that we all jump up and believe in. A recent example for it was the misunderstanding when somebody went in to pay their rent over across the way, and instead of escalating it up to the senior management and getting the rest of the story, we immediately organized a protest, had our signs out, and we're marching against whoever. And I would like us to be more comfortable in escalating, asking questions of the people that have the answers. And I expect the people that have the answers to supply the answers, whether it's the city council, the city staff, our favorite landlord, our favorite developer, or the janitor in the closet.
When they're asked or before they're asked?
Well, two things have to happen. One, when they're asked, and two, we have to learn to ask. And when we ask, we should expect to get an answer.
Okay, Bernardo.
Well, what the city has said in the past, you know, why we, for example, why don't we have public works, not public works, you know, parks and rec and community services? Well, they would always say it's a budget. We don't have enough money. We have a small city. We do have a problem with, you know, folks coming up to ask things of the city staff, and well, everybody expects that, you know, it should be like Redwood City. You should be able to ask anybody and find out at a department, but we have very little staff. We don't have too many people. We have, you know, a biggest department are the police. So, you know, it's always been the question of the budget. Why don't we have all these things, and why aren't they apparent to everybody like they are in Redwood City or Mountain View or anything else? So, you know, working on the budget, you know, just, you know, like Ruben says, to make it simpler for everybody to read it. You know, it's now a book that's about 1.5 inches thick, and we have, you know, what, 106 workers in the city. You can make a budget for every person that works in the city and make a page of it. You know, that would make it even simpler. But, you know, this year we seem to have a surplus, and we must, you know, afford those things now.
Okay,
and
now.
Put some money away, too.
Bernardo talked about the city staff being small, and it is a small city staff. And there has been, over the years, noticeable turnover, maybe lots of turnover. So what would you do as a city council member to attract more staff and to retain the current staff as much as possible? Is that important to you?
You know, I think it is very important. I think our salaries are still, you know, below the median, close to the median. So we are blessed and cursed by being who we are, and I'll explain that. Government is so localized that the rich governments can pay as much money as they can, and so people are free agents. We can go work wherever we want, and we cannot pay as much as Palo Alto. That's just a plain fact of the way government is structured in this country. And so it's like, just like we have people who are poor, we have cities who are poor. And it shouldn't be like that. In my opinion, you know, there should be some other system, but we're stuck with that because that's just the way it is. So we tried, I think management sometimes definitely can have a positive impact in holding people because there's other things that people appreciate, and certainly our employees are not there for the money because they can earn more money somewhere else. It is a struggle. I think it's important to help our employees to have better salaries as much as the city can sustain, because otherwise it's a losing proposition. It's the same in the school district with teachers, those things. That's what I call the curse of our government system, because just like we beat up on poor people, it's a system we beat up on poor cities.
In
So
the
anyway,
interest of time,
but we have to keep working on
I do
that.
have to move on.
Move
Regina,
on, yes.
what would you do to retain city staff?
So one of the things that I think we need to start thinking about is how do we house our city staff in the city of East Palo Alto and relieve them from the cost of trying to compete in the broader market for their housing. I know several city staffers who are paying as much as 70% of their income in housing. That's a big deal. I mean, most financial advisors would say you shouldn't be spending anything more than 25% on your housing, so 70% is a big deal. And so in the little bit of land that we have left to develop, part of what we should be thinking about is how do we offset some of these larger costs that belong to our city staff to help make it easier for them to be with us and to do their jobs.
In the 3 minutes that we have left, I do have to.
Understood.
Thank you. Court?
I think we have to sort of adopt a startup mentality. A lot of people stay in East Palo Alto because the work is actually interesting. And it's sort of exciting because it's not like any other city around here. And I've heard stories about people who leave, go off, get a lot more money, and come back because they got bored. And that's what a startup is. Startup is something that you're sort of betting on the future. You're betting on your own competence. And we need to build a staff and hire a city manager that looks at this as a startup and gets excited and wants to make things happen.
Bernardo?
Well, for me, to retain staff, I would feel at my age, I'm feeling that health issues, that insurance that may change on you. I've had 3 changes in my insurance this year. Stuff like that does change. It does affect you quite a bit. And
So sorry, Patricia. We have less than 1 minute.
Oh, okay.
In a few seconds, what would you do?
Yes. Well, what would I do? I, would really concentrate on that city manager to put the, the management of the city staff and try to hire, and also focus on the hiring spree of our own local community resident to take those jobs that are in the city staff that are available for them. So I would focus on hiring our own people in working in the city staff positions that are there for the people of East Palo Alto.
It's not very much that we can do in 30 seconds, but we have 30 seconds left.
Yes. And I also want to say...
Well, you've been talking.
Yes, on Proposition 10.
Well, I'm sorry, Patricia. I'd
So
love
many
to
things
have.
to talk about.
I know, and I'd love to have all of you continue on, but we do have to stop. And so I want to thank you so much for being here and giving of your time and your ideas. I'd like to thank our audience. Thank you. And I'd certainly like to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time.
Thank you, Henrietta.
Thank you.